You're watching International Correspondents. Welcome back. There's little doubt social media is now playing a big part in daily news coverage. In Iran, it practically drove content. But there are signs the Iranian government is clamping down on sites like Facebook. For more on that, I'm joined by Joel Simon in New York, Executive Director for the Committee to Protect Journalists. First of all, Joel, CPJ very concerned about the number of journalists who have been taken prisoner in Iran and their treatment.
Absolutely. What we're doing now is because there's a revolving door in Iran. Journalists are arrested, they're released. So every month we tabulate what we call a census. The last census confirmed 47 journalists in jail. That's double the number in China, which is now in second place. And we're concluding our second monthly census. We think that number is actually going to rise.
The number is going to rise, so 2010 will be a worse year for journalists, you're predicting, in Iran.
Right now, it looks like we're looking at essentially record numbers, and Iran is clearly the most repressive, if you look at the number of journalists in jail, the most repressive country in the world.
Let's talk then about Facebook and the methods that we understand from people like yourselves that the Tehran authorities are using, allegedly following journalists on Facebook, finding out who their friends and their families are. So in a sense, the social media, which seem to be on the side of the proletariat, for the want of a better word, is actually aiding the authorities as well.
Well, it's a game of cat and mouse, and for a moment, the sort of citizen journalists had the upper hand. A lot of this technology, was in place in Iran. The media itself had moved online because there was such a systematic repression against print journalists. So these mechanisms were in place. But this is a regime that is very capable. It saw what the threat was and it responded. It's at times shut down the cell network, slowed down the internet. Now it's actually using these same social media tactics against the protesters, going on Facebook, figuring out who people's friends are, figuring out who their contacts are, and using that to intimidate them.
So in a sense, you're not really buying the line, it seems to me, that it's the public in Iran who have the upper hand here when it comes to technology, at least, and citizen journalism.
No, I think right now we have to be honest about the state of affairs. The Iranian government has used massive repression, brutality, and technological savvy to mount an effective counterattack against citizen journalists. It is a game of cat and mouse. It could shift. Right now, I think the Iranian authorities have the upper hand.
You know, usually the CPJ reports on events that have happened. I wonder if you could look into your crystal ball, and while you predict the future for journalism is rather gloomy, to put it mildly, in Iran this year, do you see any changes on the horizon that might change the trajectory of this conflict, so to speak?
Yeah, I do. I mean, it's hard to predict what's going to happen, obviously, but I think that the question is how insecure does the regime feel? And if they feel truly insecure, they are going to keep applying these repressive measures. And I think that our obligation is to speak out about it. CPJ, our colleagues from other press freedom groups like Reporters Without Borders and Article 19 and PEN, we're launching a petition soon to try and get people around the world to speak out about the repression in Iran, to let the authorities know how outraged they are. And I think that even though they would deny it, there are sectors in the Iranian government that do care what the rest of the world thinks about them, and we're hoping that this forces some sort of reaction.
Well, this actually has nicely led me to what was going to be my next question, which is what forcibly can be done. When I say forcibly, I mean practically can be done about the situation for journalists specifically in Iran. What do you know, for example, generally speaking, of the conditions in which they're being held?
The conditions are abysmal. We have interviewed journalists who've been held in Iran and have been released, and the conditions they described are absolutely horrific. In the best case scenario, you're blindfolded, you're shoved into a corner, you're interrogated relentlessly. In the worst case scenario, you're tortured. And we are gravely worried about all of these 47 journalists who are held in prison in Iran. They are essentially being held incommunicado. And our obligation is to speak out about this and express our outrage.
Joel Simon of the Committee to Protect Journalists in New York, thanks very much indeed. And don't forget, if you want to see parts of the show again, stop by our website. You'll find us at cnn.com/correspondence. While you're there, check out the archive. That's cnn.com/correspondence. And just before we go, this month's media buzz. Tiger Woods has faced the cameras for the first time. After months of silence, one of the world's most famous sportsmen is trying to recover from a sex scandal. In a tightly controlled televised statement, the golfer apologised for his, quote, irresponsible and selfish behaviour. Although some members of the media were invited to listen to his remarks, they were not allowed to ask questions. The large majority of reporters watched the event on television, less than a kilometre away. A UK press watchdog has rejected a complaint made over a controversial article about the death of British singer Stephen Gately. The column in the British newspaper, the Daily Mail, last October prompted a furious reaction on Twitter and drew thousands of complaints. Many considered the article homophobic. The author, Jan Moore, later apologised for what she called the ill-timed nature of the article. Although sympathetic to the issue, the Press Complaints Commission pointed to freedom of expression. The Commission ruled that, quote, it should be slow to prevent columnists from expressing their views, however controversial they may be. Gately, the singer for Boyzone, died last October while vacationing on the Spanish island of Mallorca. And a story we'll keep you updated on. Hollywood's most famous couple are suing the UK paper The News of the World after it published allegations about their relationship. Last month, the paper said Brad Pitt and Angelina Jolie were breaking up and had agreed to divide their multi-million-dollar fortune. The couple's lawyer says the allegations were false and intrusive. And that is all for this edition of the programme. I'm Fionnuala Sweeney. Thank you for joining us. See you again next time.